Welcome to the Words to Empower podcast, featuring Bishop Frank Stewart, pastor of the Acts Ministry in Conway and North Little Rock. And now, Pastor Stewart.
Welcome back to your Acts Ministry podcast. We're talking about living on the other side of the blessing, the miracle, on the other side of the problem. And this is important. I want to stress this because when you look in the Bible, God prepares us before he moves us into our promised land, before he moves us into another dimension. He gets us ready. And one of the things that he does to get us ready is to teach us gratefulness, to teach us to be grateful. And we see that with the children of Israel in the book of Deuteronomy. So we started talking about this about 3 days ago. And our text is St. John chapter 5, where the man was at the pool of Bethesda for 38 years. 38 years he had been paralyzed. Jesus heals him, and then Jesus comes back, finds him in the temple, and tells him, stop sinning, lest something worse happens to you. And what Jesus is doing at that point is teaching him how to live on the other side. Brothers and sisters, if I could tell you how many people I have seen in my life that's been destroyed by prosperity, it would blow your mind. Prosperity destroys people I'm talking about the children of God, way more than poverty or lack. Poverty or lack, you see people praying and seeking God. But prosperity is God spends a great deal telling us what we should do once we get to that point. So this is very strategic. It's very strategic. It's very important as we're moving forward because we need to know how to live on the other side of the issue of blood. The woman had the issue of blood for 12 long years. But after you get healed, after you touch the hem of his garment, what do you do at that point? Because now this is the thing that we have to understand. Her whole life had been preoccupied with having an issue of blood. I mean, it was her life, staying alive, watching herself bleed to death, watching blood flow from her body every day. Now you don't have that problem. You don't have the thing that was all-consuming in your life. Now what do you do? So this is the same thing here in Deuteronomy chapter 8 that we started talking about yesterday. They had been over 400 years in slavery. Now you're going to come out of slavery. Your whole preoccupation has been building bricks and using straws and building pyramids and answering to the slave master. Now that's going to be gone. What do you do at that point? Brothers and sisters, this is a very important lesson. It is a very important lesson to anyone and everyone that believes that God is not going to leave you where you are, but he's going to take you to another place. He's going to take you to your promised land. You got to know how to live in it. Israel did not know how to live in it. They couldn't live in the wilderness. Couldn't deal with it. So when you look at Deuteronomy chapter number 8, he gives them all these things to be grateful for. And let me just touch on some of these things. He says to them, now, God has led you this way for 40 years, and he did it with a purpose. There was a purpose for him leading you like this. And he said the purpose was to humble you, to allow you to hunger. And then what he did is he gave you manna, miraculously bread falling from the sky. And he wanted to teach you that man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Then he started listing the things that God did for them. Your garments did not wear out. Same clothes. 40 years. It didn't wear out. He says God's going to bring you into a land that basically flows with milk and honey, a land of brooks of water, fountains, springs flowing out of valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, vines, fig trees, pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land in which you will eat bread without scarcity, in which you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron and out of whose heel you can dig copper. When you have eaten and is full, then you will bless the Lord your God for the good land which he given unto you. That's what's supposed to happen. But that next verse, he says, beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandment. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about that. I'm going to take you to a place. But before I get you there, I got to educate you. I got to teach you what it's going to be like when you are free from the burden that have kept you in bondage and kept you from being free all your life. What is your purpose of being free? I got to instill in you the purpose of freedom. So let's just keep on reading. So verse 10, he says, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to bless the Lord your God when you get to the promised land, when you're eating and are full. Then he says in verse 11, beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments. So he says to them, don't forget. You're supposed to bless the Lord when you get there. You're supposed to be grateful and bless the Lord. But don't get there and forget. And he says, now, when you've eaten and are full, now we have to be careful with that. Build beautiful houses. When your herds and your flocks multiply, silver and gold multiply. He says, be careful that your heart is not lifted up and you forget. This is verse 14. When your heart is lifted up, you forget the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. And it's what God is saying. Don't forget. Why are you telling me not to forget when I'm still in the wilderness? Because I'm going to bring you. I'm going to bring you out. I'm going to bring you out. I'm not even addressing anymore where you are. Man, this is so powerful. You got to realize how powerful it is. I'm not even sending word for where you are right now. I'm not even soliciting prayers for where you are. I'm not even answering your prayers based on where you are now. I am speaking to where you're going to be. Now just think about that. They're still in the wilderness. They're in the wilderness. They're still there. They have not crossed over to go into the promised land. And all of this talk is about the land where they're going to live. Brothers and sisters, and I know some of you are saying, yeah, God's been speaking to me about where I'm going to be and what's going to happen, and he's been saying this for years. He's getting you ready. He's getting you ready. Because if it's taking years for you to get ready, you can only imagine what that promised land is like and how much preparation you need to do so our pride and our arrogance will not destroy us. And one of the first things we have to understand is that we have that in all of us. All of us. All of us. That ugly pride. It isn't all of us. We're born in sin, shaped in iniquity. We have to work on that, and we have to crucify our flesh daily.
Stay tuned for more of Frank Stewart. And now for some special announcements.
Thanks for partnering with the Acts Ministries. We value your service and your donations. That's why we've made it easy to make contributions to support our ministry. Simply go to your web browser and click the search bar and type in actsministriesonline.org. Then click Donate Online. It's really that easy. For mobile giving, text the amount you wish to donate to 501-302-4242. That's Simple Give.
And now, more of Pastor Frank Stewart.
So he says to them, I want you to be aware of some things. Now, I want to start at verse 11, and I want to read to the end of the chapter, and we'll go back and talk about it. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, starting at verse 11, beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments, his judgments, his statutes, which I command you today, lest when you have eaten and are full and have built beautiful houses and dwell in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, when your heart is lifted up and you forget the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, who led you through that great and terrible wilderness, in which were fiery serpents and scorpions, and thirsty land where there was no water, who brought water for you out of the flint rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your father did not know, that he might humble you and that he might test you to do you good in the end. Then you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gained me this wealth. Now, I want to pause there. I got a few more verses, but I can't help but pause right there. He says, now, when all of this happened to you, you forget about God. You forget it was God that did all of this. Garments that didn't wear out, shoes didn't wear out, water from a rock, manna came from heaven, pillar of fire at night, pillar of cloud by the day, all the miraculous signs in Egypt. He says, if you're not careful, you'll forget. And this will be the evidence that you have forgotten. You will take credit for what God has done. He says you will say in your heart. Now, think about this. It's different saying something in your heart and saying it out loud. See, some of us are too smart to say stuff out loud, but the problem is if you say it in your heart, it's loud enough for God to hear it. So this secret pride, this secret arrogance that God sees it as if you were screaming it out loud. You say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gained me this wealth. Wow. 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 Now, can you imagine all that time in the wilderness, all the stuff that God has done, and everything that was happening to get over here and forget all of that and say, I did it? So that's why he says in the wilderness, I did some things to safeguard you in the promised land. And brothers and sisters, what he's doing now is doing some things right now to safeguard us when we get where he's trying to take us. And I'm telling you, we should have a holy reverence of observing and listening, because we don't want the blessings of the Lord to destroy us. We don't want to get there and say, I did it. Watch this. In verse 18, he says, and you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant, which he swore to your fathers, as it is this day. Basically what he said to them, I want you to understand, I'm going to give you power to get wealth. But the one thing I want you to understand is that it is to establish my covenant. Now understand this. Most people do not understand this. As we're approaching the 4th of July, we're approaching this time of the year where we talk a lot about freedom. Most people do not understand. God frees us for a purpose. Purpose. And if you don't know your purpose and you've been set free, you're in a very precarious situation. You're in a very dangerous situation, because freedom without purpose will lead back into slavery, or it will lead to slavery. Hear what I'm telling you. When you are free, when you are blessed, you have to understand there's a purpose to that. There's a purpose. God did it with something in his mind. Now, he says, I did this. I brought you out of Egypt. I gave you power to make wealth so you could establish my covenant, not yours, my covenant. So freedom has a purpose. It has a purpose. Has a purpose. And God doesn't set anybody free without having a purpose of them being free. And that's why he says to Peter, after you're converted, after you get free from the guilt, the shame, and all of that, after you get free from your pity party, I want you to strengthen somebody else, because freedom always carries a purpose. And if we don't understand the purpose, then we really don't understand freedom. Because if you're free and you don't understand you have a purpose in your freedom, then brothers and sisters, you have to be very careful that you don't end up going back into slavery. I want you to stay tuned as we're going to continue this thought and move forward.
For mobile giving, text the amount you wish to donate to 501-302-4242.
The Acts Church in North Little Rock is located at 1224 Franklin Street. Morning Glory begins at 8 a.m. on Sunday mornings. Sunday school begins at 8:30 a.m. And for a powerful word, Join us at 9:30 a.m. for our morning worship service. Bible study is each Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. At our Conway location, Morning Glory begins at 10 a.m. Sunday school begins at 10:30 a.m. Worship service begins at 11:30 a.m. On Thursday, our Bible class begins at 6:30 p.m. For more information, go to actsministriesonline.org or give us a call at 501-329-2055.
Thank you for tuning in to the Acts Ministry Podcast. The Acts Church is located at 1423 England Street in Conway and 1224 Franklin Street in North Little Rock, Arkansas. Tune in each day to hear an inspiring word from Pastor Frank Stewart.